Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to this episode of Pop Culture Coram Deo. I'm Jeff, here with Jared Moore. We're your hosts, and we're talking today about 2017's The Last Jedi. Jared, this is appropriate for us to be talking about The Last Jedi with you because you're the last real guy. How about that, huh? I thought about that all by myself.
The last real guy?
Yeah.
That might be true. What does that make you?
Just an admirer. Just an admirer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
jealous, huh?
Did you like this movie, Jared?
I did.
Would you say you're a big Star Wars fan?
Not a big Star Wars fan, but I mean, I watch them, enjoy them.
Okay. This movie frustrated me deeply. I am a big Star Wars fan. So, we're not here to talk about our personal opinions, though. We're here to chop this thing up in light of the glory of God, right?
Yes, sir.
So, let's get started doing that exact thing. So, what we want to do first to analyze this movie is to subject it to the scrutiny of a Christian worldview, and we're going to do that by using 4 categories of the biblical narrative: creation, fall, redemption, and glorification. Creation there speaking to what is good about this world. But before we jump into that, we're going to give you some conscience warning issues. So, Jared, what might trouble the conscience of someone who's watching this movie potentially?
I would say just the violence, probably the violence, but still, it's cleaned up some. I mean, but there is some horror in this too. Snoke is pretty scary, pretty terrifying. I mean, I'm thinking for like kids, people usually, will take young children in movies, they wouldn't take them to, they'll take them to Star Wars, most people are familiar with it. And so I would warn about that mainly. And then there's some spiritual realities, concerning the Force and concerning evil. And you believe that it gets murky on good and evil in this movie.
Yeah, I do. So just to recount those real quick, there's a lot of violence, but it is a sanitized and sort of cartoonized violence. Lightsabers cut, but they also cauterize wounds, so there's not a lot of blood.
Mm-hmm.
Snoke's scary. Snoke gets cut in half. Still, though, very, very sanitary version of that kind of death. And then there's clearly Eastern influence in terms of religious imagery brought into this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with you, though. I think those are the only things that might potentially trouble someone's conscience here. Thankfully, these movies are aimed at kids in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's still some level of modesty and decorum when it comes to what they put on the screen. So with that in mind, guys, feel free to check out Plugged In or some other review sites to get a more specific accounting. I don't remember any bad language, but maybe one of those sites that pay people to count those things would say, hey, yeah, there's some of this going on. So they can let you know. You can find that with a simple Google search. Having established that, we're talking about the 8th movie in the Star Wars universe proper. Now, there's been at least one Star Wars story, Rogue One, that doesn't really establish the main continuity. It just fills out some of the details from the main continuity of these 8 films. Obviously, there's a lot of cartoons, comic books, a lot of publication that have rounded out this world, but it's a big deal when a new Star Wars main continuity movie comes out. And this is the 8th one. I'm assuming if you're listening to this that you're familiar with the Star Wars universe. So the summary I'm going to give you is going to be built on that assumption. This comes from IMDb. Rey develops her newly discovered abilities with the guidance of Luke Skywalker, who is unsettled by the strength of her powers. Meanwhile, the Resistance prepares for battle with the First Order. That's about as general as you can get there. Jared, I mentioned creation, fall, redemption, glorification just a moment ago. What do you see in this movie that reflects the goodness of creation?
First, I think the Star Wars universe is a beautiful universe. Although it's mingled with humans and strange creatures, right? It still very much mimics our world. There is kind of a moral code, and there is good and evil. But there is a yin-yang reality to creation in Star Wars, meaning that good and evil are both present from eternity past into eternity future. They're side by side. They're both eternal.
So I'm with you in the Star Wars universe is a beautiful universe, and also that it reflects the real world in that way. But I also think it reflects the real world in the way that the more modern versions are living off the cachet of the previous versions.
Mm-hmm.
The original trilogy, which is what I still think to this day brings fans in and connects them with this universe, has a very clear moral order. There's a light side to be embraced, a dark side to be rejected. But starting even with the prequels that came out in, I guess, our teenage years, those things started going away as, the real world's own moral order began to erode out from under it. You have that ridiculous statement from Obi-Wan in his final battle with Anakin there on Mustafar, where he says that only Sith deal in absolutes, which obviously is an absolute statement. But it's, Luke is trying to ham-handedly claw after moral relativism.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think as we've gotten into these reboots with The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, that same trend towards relativism that has ramped up in speed in our own real world has been reflected in the Star Wars universe. Wars, and I think it's been to their detriment.
Interesting.
What about what's fallen in this world?
It's definitely a fallen universe, and each person can go to the dark side or the good side at any point. And something else that's interesting about Star Wars is because of the yin yang emphasis, war is a reality. I mean, it's just they're always at war, and they're always going to be at war, and it's just never going to end. I mean, that's kind of peering into redemption a little bit, but it's always falling.
Again, echoes of our world, right? I mean, when in our lifetimes has the United States not been involved in a global war?
Yeah.
You might could find 3 or 4 years.
Right.
We are in a forever war, apparently, and it shows no signs of ceasing. So Star Wars is certainly telling the truth about our world as it's currently composed. Not necessarily the way the world ought to be or even has to be, even in a fallen sense, but nonetheless, the way the world appears to be in the days of these movies' creation. Anything else you would say that's fallen there? All right, well, what about redemption? How will this fallen Star Wars universe be brought to redemption?
I think it argues that redemption's found in the good side versus dark side. It's found through courage to fight the dark side within and without. But the best that redemption can be in this world is temporary. Although some good characters persevere to the end, there's no guarantees that they will, and it can change at any moment.
When you're saying that, are you talking about The Last Jedi in particular, or the Star Wars universe in general, or both?
Both.
Okay. So where do you see this? I know where you would see this in, say, the broader world, right? Anakin started out as someone devoted to the light side. Eventually, through his own lust for power, he falls into the dark side. Later, he's redeemed by a son who brings him to a point of self-sacrifice that restores Anakin to the light side. Where do you see that specifically in The Last Jedi?
I'm thinking of Rey. I think that she's waffling back and forth of what to do. And, I forgot the bad dude's name.
Kylo.
I'm thinking the same with him. By the way, I think that actor is amazing. He does such a good job with that character, man.
I'm with you. Adam Driver's pretty impressive.
Oh, yeah. Outstanding. So that's where I'm leaning. He seems to be waffling back and forth, too. And I mean, that's from the previous ones well.
Yeah.
He seems to, and it makes you wonder if he will eventually turn the other way. Because, wouldn't that be a good story where you've got Anakin turning into Darth Vader, but you've got Kylo going from basically Darth Vader to Luke Skywalker or something? I mean, that would be
I know that we're
redeeming. I mean, that would be a great story.
We're in the midst, or we're 2/3 of the way through what they call the sequel trilogy, right? There was the original trilogy, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Last Jedi. Then you have the prequel trilogy where Lucas starts meddling with his creation. Now we're in the sequel trilogy, 2/3 of the way through. It's still entirely possible it goes that way. Rian Johnson, though, has talked about charting a new course for Star Wars. You saw it so much in The Last Jedi, like be done with the past, kill it if you have to, right? Kylo personifies that by killing his own father. I don't know. I don't know if we'll see something as redemptive as that or not. I don't know if they're going to, in some ways, travel down already trodden paths of the bad guy being redeemed. I would love it if they did. I think that would harken back to an older moral order that still sees redemption as something good. But I'm really skeptical whether or not this version of the Star Wars universe has those resources. Jared,
that's interesting.
When redemption comes to pass, though, for the ones that it does, assuming I'm wrong here, what would a glorified world look like in the Star Wars universe?
Temporary happiness until the dark side comes back. This always comes back. It's not that it comes back. It's always there. It's like you can't get rid of it.
Yeah, it's tamped down maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's just inherent in this world, in this universe. It's just there, just like good is. I mean, they're always battling back and forth and within and without, and there's no changing anything eternally.
There's just the tension of the light and the dark. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what's more central to the Star Wars universe than the idea that the Force must be balanced, right? That was Anakin's great role. He was going to bring balance to the Force. So balance is basically the highest state of being that can be attained to.
That is so bleak.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where you see, obviously, Lucas has always been drawing on Eastern religion, but he, in doing so, ports the bleakness of Eastern religion right in, right? So that's us chopping up the Star Wars universe into discrete categories. We'll move into the questions from Ted Turnow's analysis. And the first one there is, what's the story? Get it right. I'm going to run through just some summary of where we're at in The Last Jedi.
This is from StarWars.com. It says, with the destruction of the Republic, the evil First Order reigns. Now Supreme Leader Snoke looks to crush what's left of the Resistance and cement his grip on the galaxy. But hope survives. Rey has found Luke Skywalker Skywalker, a legendary Jedi Master who can change the tide of the war.
Okay, so that's a more fuller synopsis there.
Yeah.
Where are you in this story, right? Turnell asks, where am I? See the style and shape of this imaginary world. So you get plunked in here. What are you doing with it, Jared?
I think that the special effects and cinematography are excellent in this movie, and really, I mean, it's what you've come to expect of Star Wars, especially since the ones that came out in our teen years. Even the old ones are digitally remastered, and they're great. Your jaw will drop over the excellence in this movie. I mean, I also enjoyed the slapstick comedy. What'd you think about that? Did you like any of that?
I thought it was overdone.
Did you? It reminded me of, it makes you wonder if they're trying to appeal to those who, the success of like Guardians and Avengers and all that.
I think you're very much on the right track there. I just don't think it's to their advantage.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed it, but yeah, there's always been a little bit of thing here and there.
Yeah. Much more wry though.
Right.
And a little bit more subtle. This was right up front. You have that skit about I'm on hold for General Hux or whatever. You know, it was a bit that opened the movie.
Just just overtly, and I enjoyed it. But maybe they're trying to appeal to families, but they're probably just seeing the success of these other franchises. But grief, what's bigger than Star Wars? You know?
Sure, man. I mean, I can get going on this. I thought that part was charming. That's Poe poking fun at the First Order, but that they continue to do it, particularly when we got to Luke Skywalker and his flippancy about the state of the state of the galaxy and whatnot. It was just overdone, and like you said, I don't think they ought to be playing to Guardians of the Galaxy. I think they should be playing to the great epics of the Western tradition, which is what Star Wars kind of functions like for people living post 1970. You know, so I'll climb down off my soapbox temporarily, but yeah, they're clearly stylizing the Star Wars universe for a Disney-fied audience.
Yes, good call. That's what I'm thinking. Where do you see yourself in this world?
Well, I'm a fanboy in this world, man. I am caught up in the grandeur of Star Wars when I watch these movies. One of the things you talked about is how they're visually rich and stunning. The other aspect of that is the scoring of this movie. The power of music to move you along in a narrative and to connect you with a story. I'm no great music critic, but there's no franchise I would point to that says the music draws me into the moment more than what John Williams does with the Star Wars soundtrack. And so it is a visually lush environment, and I always go into them with the widest of eyes. If there's ever a moment when I can return to my childhood years, it's when that yellow text is scrolling along a starry background, and I'm getting ready to go back into the world of Star Wars. So I see a lot here through admiring eyes. And again, I'm the guy who loves these movies because of the echoes of that moral order and the significance that is attached to either giving yourself to the good moral order or giving yourself to the wicked moral order. That frames this experience of a movie for me in a way that very few other films are framed. Even other Disney movies that lend themselves to it, like the Captain America movies or the Avengers, stuff like that. What's true and good and awesome here in this world? So where do we see common grace?
I think there's a clear good and a clear evil. That's my opinion there. I think you may disagree with that. I think the movie gets good and evil right, largely where good and evil are located. So they're both within and without. A lot of movies get that wrong. It's either totally outside of us, and rarely do they say it's inside of you anymore. At least Star Wars continues that from the older.
That's a great point.
Older movies. The movie gets self-sacrificing love right, like Admiral Holda, who sacrifices herself for the resistance. The movie gets friendship right, loyalty right, and I think it gets a desire for redemption right. You know, you can't discriminate concerning watching this as a Christian, right? You can't lose hope that God can change someone's heart. Now in this movie, it's the Force change someone's heart, or the like you said, giving yourself. You can't give up hope that Kylo will give himself to the good, and Rey doesn't. She doesn't seem to give up on him, and I think that is admirable. It's something that should be. It's a positive thing about this movie, not a negative. I also think the movie gets leadership right. True leaders who love those under them are willing to sacrifice themselves for their good, the good of those under them. Whether this is people who are serving in government, whether it's in our workplace, whether it's husbands and wives, or parents for their children. Giving yourself up for them is admirable.
Well said. Well said. Those are things I should appreciate more, particularly the example of Hulda giving herself for the safety of her friends and the resistance. Don't let me mention that this is a world that has autonomous robots known as droids that can pilot a spaceship perfectly well, and there's no need for Hulda to stay on board. She can just leave and let a droid pilot the ship into oblivion or whatever. I'm not going to point out a ginormous plot hole like that at all, because I want to be enthusiastic about the project. Now, all joking aside, you're right. The leaders in Star Wars tend to give them, on the good side anyway, tend to give themselves for the good of the movement, other people, things like that. And traditionally anyway, the leaders of the dark side are very self-centered and power-hungry and capricious, vindictive. So in that way, Star Wars tells us that evil is evil and good is good, which is refreshingly kind of a throwback to a different world. Go ahead and ask me, what's good, true, and awesome here?
What's good, true, and awesome?
Lightsabers.
Oh, yeah.
We still get lightsabers, man. There's nothing that I could bring out of a fictional world into our world that I would want more than the ability to have a lightsaber. So
cool, man.
I love seeing laser swords.
And Kylo's is awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, see, it'll cut your hand. I want the traditional, I don't want the exhaust ports and stuff from his fractured crystal. I want a blue laser sword. Thank you very much. Get right on that.
I hope you get one day, buddy.
Thanks, bud. If I do, you're in danger. I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to try it out on you pretty quickly.
I'll have a gun.
Okay, I'm willing to take that. I'm willing to take that challenge. What's distorted, evil, and false here? How can I subvert idolatry? That would be Turnow's fourth question.
I think the only people who can say man in this movie is man, and like we said in our last episode, only the resources that exist in this world can overcome temporarily the evil that's there. Men can simply resist the dark side and live for the good side. Man,
the light side.
Yeah,
Jared, the light side.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're aggravating my Star Wars nerd.
I'm pretty sure that Luke called it the good side.
Well, this Luke doesn't know Star Wars either.
Not in this one, but in previous movies.
Well, it's still wrong, Jared. Call it the light side.
I'll call it the light side.
Don't make me scream at you in Wookiee.
Man, I would do it. Do you know Wookiee? Do it. Come on.
I'm going to insert a sound effect of Wookiee screaming right now.
Man is both the culprit and the savior in this movie.
Well said.
And literally in a short amount of time, one can switch from good to bad or bad to good. I mean, it's just like a switch going off.
That's absolutely true. And really the only thing that matters is your self-professed allegiance to either the light or the dark. Literally Darth Vader is a perpetuator of genocide and murdered a Jedi, daycare full of kids. But he throws the Emperor down the well, and all of a sudden we're like, yeah, he's back on the light side, guys. This dude's fine. There's no moral consequence.
Yeah, and Kylo, we're led to believe that, well, maybe he's coming to the light side. Maybe he's...
Yeah. That doesn't matter that he's guilty of fratercide. No, it doesn't matter. Not fratercide, it's patercide. Yeah. I got to get my Latin stems and roots figured out.
We're just we're cheering him on. All right. Yeah, he's coming to the light side. And he's that evil. He may be worse than his dad.
Yeah. Grandpa,
my bad.
That's right. So I guess really, Jared.
How is that his grandpa? That dude's like 2,000 years old. Or he looked at.
No. He is Darth Vader's grandson, is what I'm saying.
Oh, gotcha.
Not Snoke. We don't know anything about Snoke. That's another problem.
Gotcha.
Snoke is this super awesome, powerful being that we're led to believe is of great significance, can rebuild the First Order, and he not even smart enough to keep his eyes open when his protege, who he's supposed to have absolute mastery over, is plotting to cut him in half with a force-moved lightsaber. But again, I'm not going to talk about plot holes here. I'm not going to talk about criticisms.
It's a Disney movie, man.
Yeah, it very much is. Well, the idolatry that I see in this movie that is false, and that I really would warn people against, is twofold. One, I think this movie is nihilistic, and two, I think this movie is, and The Force Awakens is bending towards moral relativism in a way that really undercuts everything that's good about the moral order of the Star Wars universe that made us fall in love with it in the beginning. I think this movie presents Rey, who is supposed to be the great hope of the light side, as the counterpart to Kylo, and that it suggests there's not a huge difference between them. So one of the ways you see this is when Rey shows up to be trained by Luke, and he's playing hard to get or whatever, rejecting it. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he gives her an experience sort of like what he experienced when Yoda was training him to go to this place of particular dark side power, right? Mm-hmm. And there he confronts this vision of Darth Vader, and the decapitates it, and he finds out that it's his own face staring back at him from under Darth Vader's cowl. And he has to wrestle with the potential to fall to the dark side within himself. Well, Luke notes that when Rey is taken to that cave, she just hops right in. There's no trepidation. There's no fear. She gets down in there, and the dark side doesn't do anything that she is repulsed by. Luke sees Darth Vader in his dark side's vision, and he pulls out his lightsaber to fight it. Rey just keeps walking further into the path and asking, almost in a religious sense, that this dark side hole in the ground would reveal to her parentage. And nothing of consequence happens to her there. There's no trial here that reveals her moral fiber. She just hops back out of the hole later on, goes about her normal business. I think what that's telling us is that whatever she is, traditional morality is not affecting her the way that we've seen in previous films, even if Rian Johnson doesn't know he's telling us that. With Kylo, it's Kylo who kills the great villain of the film, right? It's the bad guy killing the bad guy. Mm-hmm. He fights alongside the avatar of the light side as they move to escape from the throne room after they've killed Snoke. And then they are parted basically on the point of who follows who. So Rey wants Kylo to come with her. Kylo wants Rey to come with him. They end in stasis. They're both pulling this lightsaber. Neither one is stronger than the other. And it eventually, I guess, explodes the power cell in the lightsaber. She recovers and runs off, but we have no sense that either one of them was more right, more powerful, more aligned with what is ultimately true in this universe. Mm. And, I'm on my soapbox. I'll try to wrap it up here pretty quickly. I'm more troubled, too, by a Luke Skywalker who was once the moral center of this universe. He was the conscience of this universe. When we meet him in the original trilogy, he's a man who's not only a believer in the light side, but gives himself to it so much that he was willing to turn himself over to the Emperor in order to see his vision of redeeming his father fulfilled. Mm-hmm. In The Last Jedi, he looks into his nephew, sees a bunch of darkness there, and decides, at least temporarily, to pull out his lightsaber. And in doing that, basically creates or justifies Kylo's descent into the darkness. Because of that failure, this guy who, again, was willing to stare down the Emperor and his corrupt father for the hope of redemption, retreats to an island and hides out from the rest of the universe. When we see him training Rey, in the brief little bit of training she gets from Luke, he sits around a pool that looks like what I think they're doing with Rey and Kylo. It looks like a yin-yang symbol, that in the good, there's an element of evil, and in the evil, there's an element of the good. And I think that's how that's how Rian Johnson is telling us to think about Rey and Kylo, and it looks like Luke has enthroned that in his sanctuary there where he's training the next Jedi. I think this is skewing towards pluralism very rapidly. And I say it's ultimately nihilistic because, like you just said, nothing is gained when the light triumphs. And I guess that's probably my biggest frustration with the sequel trilogy, starting with The Force Awakens. Mm-hmm. We were led to believe that the events of A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and The Last Jedi were of great consequence for the cosmos. That if things don't go well here, the universe is in ruin and it's lost, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that we were led to believe that good was going to happen wasn't just with a son willing to put himself in danger to redeem a father. It was a father being compelled by his fatherly affection for his son to turn away from the power he'd been living for and to die on behalf of his child, right? There was self-sacrifice. But there was also this hope of a new world that would be built. So you see this scoundrel and a princess who, against all odds, fall in love. And you get this vision of basically the classic idea of a comedy. This story's going to end in a wedding, and there's going to be a happily ever after moment. Mm-hmm. Well, by the time we show back up in The Force Awakens, nothing has changed. Nothing has been gained. There's no new Jedi Order. Luke hasn't established any kind of better or even restored version of the Jedi, right? He's living off somewhere nobody knows where. Han and Leia aren't together. They've had a child, but things have went sideways and they're separated. And even, what looks just like the Empire has built this big gun that doesn't just blow up Alderaan. Now it blows up the entire New Republic. And so to whatever degree there was a better world created, by the time we get to see it, we only get to live in it long enough to see people run out onto their balcony as they're blown up. And the First Order, by the time, as you said in this, the broader summary, the First Order is already taking over the galaxy. So nothing of consequence happened in the original trilogy. We're literally right back where we started in the sequel trilogy, and they're skewing, I think, towards relativism. Just tells me that in the Star Wars universe, nihilism wins, that nothing's of great consequence, nothing is of importance. The most you can hope for is status quo or balance. And good night, dude. That's depressing.
Oh, it's miserable.
So again, I'm sorry to pontificate, but I am very much a frustrated idealist here, and I'm very much a frustrated, for lack of a better term, lover. I love this universe. I've spent more time with it than pretty much any imaginative world, and I feel like the people who are holding it in stewardship now don't understand what made it so compelling in the beginning and are really squandering all the resources that this narrative holds.
Okay.
Tell me where I'm too bleak.
No, I think that's an interesting interpretation. But I hope that they go the other route, that Kylo is brought the other direction. I hope that there is a bad coming to the good.
That'd be wonderful, and there's room for it.
That's what I'm hoping for, because I don't know where they're going to go. Because if you go the moral relativism route, people are going to go berserk, because nobody wants because these guys obviously represented Nazis, right? I mean,
sure.
I mean,
that's the imagery they drew on, at least in The Force Awakens.
Yeah, they drew on Nazi imagery, and they're still dressed like that in many ways.
Well, but CJ, what I'm going to say is I think they're positioning Kylo to reject the First Order.
Okay.
Or at least to remake it in his image, right? Because he kills Snoke, and he tells Rey straight up, let's be done with Jedi and Sith. Let's create a new thing. And so I think for them, the quote unquote new thing that's as old as, you shall not surely die. The new thing is going to be some moral synthesis that's a new way forward, right? I mean, Rian Johnson has said that he's very intentionally trying to tell a story in the Star Wars universe that doesn't have any relationship to the Skywalkers, and he's in charge of the movies that are coming after this trilogy. I will not be surprised at all if Kylo doesn't cast aside the Nazi imagery of the First Order and develop some kind of Eastern good is bad and bad is good.
Interesting.
New administration of the cosmos.
Yeah, that'll be awful.
I would love for you to be right, but you say people would go crazy. I do think there's a lot of people who would be very upset about that, but I believe in a world where we've given ourselves to the foolishness of moral relativism, we won't have the resources to criticize it, and we won't have people who are trained to love the good and hate the evil well enough to financially weaken the attempts to create a new moral order with the Star Wars universe.
But moral relativism, when it's portrayed on screen in a story, it is often recognizable, like easily recognized. The foolishness of it, in my opinion, like it's hard to present moral relativism as a good thing, or as a thing that's good for the whole world or good for the cosmos. Or
you would say that just as image bearers, we're designed to buck against that, right?
Well, we are, and the people who we know as moral relativists don't claim they're moral relativists. Like they don't recognize that they are.
Yeah, it's hard to live that out.
Well, they're blinded.
Sure. Well, that would be my counterpoint. We're good at suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, and laser swords and space battles may be enough for us to say, no, these new Star Wars are great. So I want to be wrong, and I don't mean to just be hostile in my counterpointing. I just am deeply pessimistic about the vision that's guiding these films, and I feel like I see these threads that are disturbing.
It'll be interesting because it means that Kylo and Rey will have to fight probably against the Resistance and against the other side, which just means more war. That it'll be interesting. You have to redefine what is good and evil, and more relativism would mean no war, right? They'd have to quit fighting.
Well, I think some of that is being set up, though. Like, we have those repeated images in this movie of Rey and Kylo reaching for one another and almost coming into contact. Like they are so close to embracing one another. And I wonder if it's not going to be that, again, that synthetic idea of what we once considered evil and what we once considered good, seeing them united together in a way that gives us a new moral vision. It just crawls all over me, but that's the pessimism with which I watch this movie.
Yeah, and that would totally turn every movie on its head, right? It would totally...
It'd be a refutation of everything that had come before.
Yeah.
And I wish I believed they had the fortitude and even the self-awareness to realize that's what's going on. But here, I think that they're happy being novel for the sake of novelty, not realizing that they're just, I'm thinking of Rian Johnson in particular, but the creative committee that's supposed to be guiding the overall vision of Star Wars Wars, I wonder if they're not just blindly slipping down the current of our cultural moment.
It's interesting, man. It's interesting.
So what would you say, since I've been, sitting here pouring rainwater all over this, give us good news. What would you say, how would you say the gospel applies?
Well, I think the movie gets right that all men and women are broken, but the movie teaches that man can fix himself. Man will just persevere on the good side. He will say, man, problem is that no man perseveres on his own. The movie gets right that if man is capable of civic good, but where it goes wrong is in arguing that man is capable of saving good. The Bible teaches that man is capable of civic good. You think of governing authorities, right? Governments are nothing more than people with power and authority, but the Bible also teaches that man is not capable of saving good. Man can do nothing to overcome his own sin, its penalty, and man cannot reconcile himself to God. And if we're going to be saved, God alone must save us. And so that's what we have in Jesus Christ. We have the God-man, God himself coming to save us. He came to do what he required of us, fulfill it for us, but then die the death that we deserve, taking our penalty and our punishment, and then literally conquering death and ascending, but then through the power of the Holy Spirit, uniting us to himself, that where he is, we may be also. And it's pretty amazing when you look at the Bible, what is described concerning Christians. I mean, in the book of Hebrews, Jesus is at the right hand of God, which is a position of authority. And it's in the throne room of God, the things that the Holy of Holies mimic on earth. And Jesus says, where he is, we are as well in him. I mean, that's miraculous. That's amazing. And so the only way to overcome the evil within and the evil without is we've got to be reborn. We've got to be changed. Someone outside of us has to change us. And it's not another man. It's not another person. Well, it is another person, but it's the God-man. God must change us. And so this movie does not have that. This movie has, it's basically humanism run amok.
Humanism kind of empowered by Eastern quasi-mystical religious nonsense.
Yeah, it's weird. It's very strange because there's no objective. This force is this immaterial objective reality, but who made it? Like, where'd it come from? Like, what? It's just it's very weird. It's a very weird, strange world.
And it's getting weirder. Again, negative Nancy here, but we had this sense that the dark side and the light side was something one could grow stronger in, right? In previous incarnations, that there was a way to progress in goodness or evil.
Mm-hmm.
In this one, Luke's going to burn down the repository of Jedi teaching. And yes, it appears that Rey stole those texts, but Luke doesn't know that. He's going to burn them down. And when he's prevented from doing so, Yoda shows up and sets him on fire and tells Luke that Rey has everything she needs within her. And, again, we know she stole the books, so she, quote, has what she needs, but the way it's played is to say that she is capable with her own internal resources to do everything necessary to be what she's been called to be by the Force. And so it's that, again, humanism empowered by New Age spirituality. And what started off as a weird world with this Force is getting weirder because it's refuting its own laws.
I wonder people who argue that this is... I mean, how does this help society? Like, where is this type of religion prevalent where it's actually working to present
itself as a servant?
Yeah.
Well, we get some of that with the old Republic where the Jedi were the keeper of law and order, right? They were a religious order that had special gifts, but they used it in service to their fellow man. That's another reason it's so disappointing to see Luke unable to muster up anything like a new Jedi order after he suffers his first frustration. Because now the people who are positioned to serve they use their power in a very Christian way to serve others who are weaker. Well, the last echoes of them are hiding out on an island and don't want to be disturbed. Thank you very much.
Okay. What do you think about at the end of the movie with the little kids?
Well, I think you're seeing Rian Johnson's idea that we can have a Star Wars universe that's not connected to the Skywalkers.
Okay.
And I would be very willing to follow him down that path if this fated family that you spent so much time telling us was of cosmic significance, right? Anakin was created by the Force. He was the prophesied one. Luke redeems him. So much of that's really rich Christian imagery, right? This nobody from nowhere turns out to be one of the most important figures in human history. This same figure goes into the jaws of death in the hands of the enemy and comes out on the far side having redeemed fallen people. Like all that's built in there, but that's not what Ryan wants to tell. Ryan wants to say the Skywalkers are of no great consequence. there's going to be little boys in stables all around the galaxy who rise to do great things like Luke does, and they're going to be equally of no consequence. Is the other side of what he's saying that he hasn't actually articulated. I'm not sure he even understands that he's saying that. But if nobody's of significance, nothing is of significance, right? So I'd be very willing to see that child from the stable and a host of people like him rise to take the spotlight. But I would prefer it in a world where what you told me was of great consequence, namely the events of the original trilogy, turned out to be of great consequence and not given a hard reset less than a generation later. And if that's how it played out with Luke and his family, I have no reason to believe the stable boy will accomplish anything more lasting than Luke or anybody else. So one of my favorite aspects of the Star Wars universe is how it lends itself to development and mythology. There was a series of books that came out of what was called the Star Wars Renaissance that developed into what they called the extended universe. All these novels that tell new stories about Star Wars. I love them deeply. They were wiped away when Lucasfilm was purchased by Disney, but they managed to tell those stories. Now, some of it looked like what we're seeing in the sequel trilogy. Remnants of the Empire would come back and make threatening action, but they also found new threats. There were species that came from outside of the known galaxy to battle. That's much more linear in the way that I think history is actually linear. It's moving toward Jesus Christ and was directed by him both in his life in the incarnation and before and in his exaltation. The Star Wars universe we have right now is deeply cyclical. It looks like a cycle of rebirth and reincarnation. And I much prefer the linear universe.
Interesting.
Yeah, I have probably never on this podcast sounded more like the old man telling the kids to get off my lawn. But I don't think that my frustration with this film is rooted in mere nostalgia or sentimentality. I think it's because it was telling us a version of actual cosmic history. There are consequential actions made by people that affect forevermore the course of this cosmos, most specifically in the Promised One, right? Who came and altered history towards his ends. I think this new set is telling us lies about the way the world actually works, that we're not in some kind of meaningless loop, as these films suggest, but that we actually are on a trajectory towards Christ's glory by his control.
Good stuff, man.
I guess good stuff. You can tell I'm salty about it, man.
Yeah.
But these movies are important. These movies used to be a great way to illustrate some of the concepts of our faith that our neighbors who aren't participants in the faith would find incomprehensible. It's less so now. And I think we've really legitimately lost something in the change. Anything else you want to say about The Last Jedi?
No, I think we're ready to finish, brother.
No, I'm not. I could gripe about Luke, gripe about a guy who says he wants to go live on an island away from everybody, but leaves a map to come find him. I mean, this is a movie that has real flaws. Will I buy it when it comes out on Blu-ray? Absolutely. I'll pre-order it. But I'm sitting here very frustrated as a Christian and as a Christian who's a Star Wars fan. So on that down note, I'm sorry to kind of rain negativity all over this thing. I guess we'll put a bow on this.
When Kylo is the Christ figure in the new movie, will you repent in sackcloth and ashes?
I don't know if I'll like in sackcloth and ashes, but I may in a T-shirt that has Lucasfilm on it or something. I mean, I would be delighted. I think I would be the guy most excited to say I was wrong and isn't it glorious? So
I was wrong and isn't it glorious? I want that on audio if that ever happens. I want that that will be your ringtone.
That can be our first Pop Culture Coram Deo T-shirt.
Yes,
I was wrong and it was glorious.
That's good. Yeah.
All right, Jared. So outside of Pop Culture Coram Deo, where can our listeners find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at Jared H. Moore. You can find me on Facebook at All Truth is God's Truth. You can find me on my website, jaredmoore.exaltchrist.com. Jeff and I also have a blog on Patheos, patheos.com/blogs/Pop Culture Coram Deo. We have companion pieces to all of our episodes, and we actually write more articles on there, things that we don't cover on the show. Like Jeff has written some articles about Lady Bird. What's some other ones, Jeff?
I've called it Oscar bait because these are movies that are up for multiple different Oscar nominations this year. Lady Bird's there. We had covered Get Out on one of our early episodes, so a write-up is there for that. Shape of Water, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which, by the way, I'd really encourage people to think through that movie. I think that's an underappreciated movie for Christians. And I may write something up about I, Tonya. I haven't seen Phantom Thread or The Post yet, but if I can get those in before, I think it's next week, I'll throw those up too.
Good deal.
You you can find me at Right Jeff on most social media platforms if you're interested in doing so. And just to put it out there, I'm totally willing to hear you tell me that I'm acting like the angry grandpa who is too protective of his childhood. I don't think that's what's going on, but I'm happy to hear it if you want to tell me that. We'd love to get those reviews on iTunes. We particularly covet those 5-star reviews because that moves the iTunes algorithm to show new people our show, but we'll take whatever review you want to leave for us. Please do reach out to us on social media, all the different places you can find us, and let us know what you're thinking about through this show. We want to be useful to believers, and we want to be useful to believers as they serve unbelievers too. So your feedback helps us know if we're accomplishing that goal, and if so, to what degree. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up this episode of Pop Culture Coram Deo. Thanks again for listening. On behalf of Jared Moore, let me say have a good rest of the week, and we will talk to you next time on Pop Culture Coram Deo.